So when it comes to procrastination itself, I believe there are 4 specific behavioural patterns of avoidance, which is what procrastination ultimately is. It's a way of avoiding something, you're putting something back in some sort of way. But I believe there are 4 specific behavioural patterns of avoidance that lead to procrastination as the end result of these patterns of behaviours, and you could say that these are archetypes. Now, some people are saying that these are not archetypes because archetypes are supposed to represent something in other sort of specific way with regards to maybe mythology or whatever. But behaviour patterns that are objectively cyclical with people are usually archetypes because it's a pattern, it's a consistent thing that happens. So this list will help you identify which archetype resembles your personality the most, so that you can begin developing the self-awareness needed first to defeat procrastination for good, and to be able to look at it, be aware of what type of behavioural pattern you have that's consistent, and then see what the solutions would be to defeating that. So number 1, I would say, the first one, let's call it the self-deprecator. Now, the self-deprecator, they're kind of their own worst enemy by being overly self-critical of their endeavours. Everything they do, they're just super critical of it. So when certain tasks are not completed, a strong sense of guilt will overpower them, basically, which will keep them in a state of paralysis, you could say. And this sense of guilt may also be the cause to their lack of boundaries with others, by having a tendency to be more pleasing, as they do not want to let others down. So this consistent cycle and emotion of guilt constantly keeps coming up for them. So this blend of experiencing guilt and self-criticism towards themselves often leads to inaction, because they're kind of instantaneously putting down or trying to stamp upon their own self-esteem. And when you have low self-esteem, that can spiral into being just having very low amounts of willpower towards their own responsibilities or whatever they want to do, and that is self-deprecation. And the sense of guilt in relation to themselves, and what you could say being overly self-critical of themselves, is what leads to the procrastination in that sense. So that's one form. Another form you could say is the perfectionist. Now, most people are probably this when it comes to procrastination. They get caught up in the trap of seeking endless perfectionism and idealism rather than being focused on getting things completed in reality. Now, this is kind of like a delusion we put onto ourselves, this idea of perfectionism, this idea of idealization, even when perfectionism is not a thing that can be grasped. So this is caused by, again, consistent self-doubt of their own work, but this is more down to a fear of failure, that their efforts will never be good enough, and this fear of failure with regards to their efforts feeds into this. Well, I would say the fear of failure feeds into the perfectionism, and then that becomes an insecurity and a consistent cycle that just keeps going over and over and over again. So this can lead to being very efficient in completing small aspects of things, because you're a perfectionist. You want to really identify the really small details of certain problems, but not very effective in completing the overall task at hand due to focusing too much on the minuscule details that are given overinflated importance. So that can often be a behaviour of someone who's a perfectionist. Focus on very small things. Maybe they overinflate the importance of very specific things, and they kind of trap themselves within the perfectionist attitude of that. Now, the third one would be the busybody. So the busybody is someone who gets caught up in trying to do too many things in too short of a time frame, because they are impulsive and feel like time itself is running out. That time and death itself is chasing them down the road, or something, that they need to get things done quickly. And again, this often leads to, well, this is more specific to the busybody, someone who's just constantly doing stuff. So this sense of urgency that is kind of on steroids often leads to like burnout or exhaustion, whereby their lack of prioritization towards their self-care in relation to themselves causes them to be inconsistent with their own routine, making it very difficult to focus on any task at hand. So the idea of self-care is very much thrown out the window for the busybody. You could say like they're constantly in a Superman syndrome state. They're constantly trying to get things done outside of themselves, but not actually paying attention to themselves and their own self-care, because all of their energy is going on to things that are not actually themselves and their own health. They're also maybe putting pressure on themselves to prove themselves, which is why this might be consistently happening to others, for the external validation of their own self-worth, than rather trying to validate their own self-worth for themselves. And recognizing their own accomplishments. So they're always looking outside of themselves, the external world, accomplishments, exhaustion, burnout, things like this. And this is the busybody. So this leads to procrastination, because they'll have a burnout stage, they'll be exhausted, and they won't be able to be consistent with things. So the last one, I would say, this is quite consistent as well. This is very consistent with people who are so super ingrained within social media, consumption, consumerism, stuff like this. But the novelty seeker, they get distracted very easily by any new idea, task, or product that grasps their curiosity. This leads them to focusing too much on things that don't matter, making it very difficult for them to complete anything that they are planning to do. So novelty, you could say, is the main crux here, is often what excites them, which causes them to struggle staying consistent on one singular project or pursuit that they have for themselves. So this is obviously a massive problem as well. So novelty being the main problem here. This individual may be very curious about many different things in life, but that can be a crux as well, or a double-edged sword on each end, because their curiosity gets rid of their discipline, it gets rid of their consistency to be able to get things completed. And also, someone who is seeking novelty is very easily distracted, someone who's very prone to distraction and of course, like things like social media definitely elevate that procrastinatory problem with things of that nature. So those are the 4, you could say, behavioral patterns of avoidance that lead to procrastination: the self-deprecator, the perfectionist, the busybody, and the novelty seeker. So in the comments, maybe write down what, in your opinion, what you believe is the one that is most consistently you. Now, some might say, well, these all represent me. They could do, because archetypes are within everyone, right? That's the thing about the archetype. To some degree, they're within everyone's collective. It's within the collective unconscious, as Jung would say, so it's all houses within the self. But in relation to your procrastination, which do you believe is most consistent with you? Which behavior pattern do you do the most? If it was me, for example, I would go the busybody. That's just one thing that I'm quite prone to doing, working really hard on loads of different things, and then plateauing onto exhaustion, and then that exhaustion getting rid of my consistency. So if someone is like that, they need to focus on their self-care, they need to focus on themselves with regards to setting time for themselves instead of the things that they are constantly doing all the time, because they have a lot of willpower and a large amount of drive. So for me, that's what mine would be. So if you resonate with any of these behavioral avoidance archetypes that I just laid out to you there, you can book in a free one-on-one coaching call with me, where I work with people to overcome different forms of procrastination depending on which archetype they kind of resonate with. But you could say the 5 tenets of self-improvement that I focus on with every individual that comes in is usually on self-limiting beliefs, bad habits, lack of discipline, low self-esteem, social anxiety. Because those usually cover all the bases of self-improvement. So with like self-limiting beliefs or intrusive thoughts, I'd be focusing on cognitive processing, Socratic questioning, shadow work, and all those different aspects. bad habits, I'd be focusing on habit formation psychology through behaviorism and the application of that. With lack of discipline, if someone lacks discipline, be focused on prioritization skills and techniques through psychology. If someone is struggling with low self-esteem, again, that would be the application of gratitude through what has been practiced with religion. It's a very necessary thing to apply when it comes to self-esteem building. And then social anxiety would be situational exposure, or building and overcoming fear hierarchies that we would build through the process of our calls and our sessions. So if you believe any of those resonate with you and you believe any of those solutions would be very useful for you with overcoming procrastination, book in a free call, absolutely free, 30 minutes we can have a chat, see what the problem is, and apply those solutions to you over the course of coaching. So if you enjoyed this video, guys, make sure to share it around. Comment which procrastination archetype you think you are in the comments below. Get a conversation going, and I'll speak to you in the next one. Thanks for watching.